Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. So today I want to talk about what happens to Alice and Frank Longbottom shortly after Voldemort's first downfall. As many of you know, they were horrifically tortured by several Death Eaters to the point of insanity, which left them in a permanent broken state of mind and a lifetime stay in St Mungo's hospital. I'm going to go into great detail about what happened and the situation leading up to the events, with a goal to understand why this happened and the effects it would have on their newborn son Neville. This is one of the most shocking moments from the books, and I believe it highlights that Neville and Harry were similar in more ways than one, which is something I'll talk about a little later on. So let's dive deep into this heartbreaking event. Let's look at the mindset of everyone involved, what they were thinking at that point in time, so we can really get a grip on things. The First Wizarding War was in full swing. Back and forth, the forces of Voldemort battled the Order of the Phoenix. It was direct on-field combat. It was guerrilla warfare, trying to take certain wizards out. People were going missing. People were being tortured. People were being killed. Lord Voldemort had taken his forces to the brink of victory. Albus Dumbledore was doing all he could to hold on, but it seemed it was definitely a case of prolonging the inevitable, instead of actually believing that the Dark Lord could be defeated. It hadn't been more than 40 years since Gellert Grindelwald and his forces suffered defeat before Lord Voldemort emerges and grasps a hand on the torch that has been passed on to him by the shadows of Grindelwald's past. The Ministry are about to fall. He is so close to victory. Then, without question, Voldemort just disappears completely out of the blue, without any explanation. Nobody had known what had happened. How did the Dark Lord just vanish? He couldn't have vanished, according to many. It was evidence that he had been captured by the Order, or at least held somewhere. That was the thought of several Death Eaters anyway. Lucius Malfoy thought he was killed, and actually tried to take control of the ranks and continue the assault, only to discover that he couldn't command the same respect that his master could. Let's go back to the Death Eaters who believed that Voldemort was still alive. Bellatrix Lestrange, her husband Rodolphus, his brother Sebastian, and Barty Crouch Jr. They were all convinced that Voldemort was being held somewhere and were convinced that they could free him. Obviously this wasn't the case at all, but it didn't stop their relentless search for him. The Death Eaters knew that the Auror department would surely have something to do with their master's location, and started with the two people who would surely have the answers they wanted. Frank and Alice Longbottom were a married couple who also just happened to be two of the most powerful and effective Aurors that the department has ever seen. They were incredibly skilled with a wand and were responsible for the capturing and incarceration of dozens of Death Eaters, along with Alistair Moody. They were so well respected that it was more likely that their son Neville would be the one getting all the attention from the wizarding world had their careers continued to flourish up until Neville's Hogwarts beginnings. However, as we know, that was not the case. Both Alice and Frank became the prime target for Bellatrix and her associates. They captured each of them individually, which was quite clever, before taking them to an undisclosed location. Bellatrix probed both Alice and Frank for information, together and separately. She became more aggressive as they refused to divulge anything. Therefore, that presented a tense yet uneasy situation. The Longbottoms really did not know what happened to Voldemort, and they were telling the truth, whereas Bellatrix was 100% totally convinced that they did know what happened to Voldemort and were just refusing to tell them. It was clear as day that Bellatrix was in no way going to leave them alive, as they posed such a great threat to the Death Eater campaign anyway, but she would do what she needed to do in order to get the information that she wanted. So Bellatrix, along with the other three Death Eaters, used the Unforgivable Cruciatus Curse, a dark spell that sent a mind-shattering, excruciating pain all over the victim's body. The pain is described to be so bad that it does not allow the person on the receiving end to even think. The crimson colour of the spell makes it instantly recognisable, and it was created purely from dark magic. Bellatrix, like her master, shared a love for torturing victims before killing them, but in this case she actually needed the information. Bellatrix and the others used the curse for long longer and longer each time, demanding again and again the location of Voldemort, to which they got the same response. She became so filled with rage that she used to curse one final time and instructed her husband, his brother and Barty not to let their wands up, to hold the spell until she says to stop. To be on the end of the Cruciatus curse for one person is bad enough, but for 4 people to concentrate their total effort of one spell on a single person, well, to be honest, I'm struggling to even find words to describe the pain level. They done the same to both Alice and Frank, taking the spell's power so far beyond the point of toleration that the Longbottoms' minds shattered completely. Their bodies twitched and hinged from the spell, but the expressions on their faces soon faded to nothingness. The damage had been done, and Bellatrix knew it. They didn't get what they wanted, but performed an act so malice that it shook the very core of the magical community. There wasn't a single person who had not heard of what happened to Alice and Frank. The Order of the Phoenix intervened and captured the 4 Death Eaters, but it was far too late. While the 3 Death Eaters willingly went to Azkaban, Crouch Jr. openly denied his involvement and pleaded with his father to no avail. The Longbottoms were taken to St Mungo's hospital in order to receive treatment, but upon their evaluation and assessment were deemed incurable. Their minds were gone, shattered and broken beyond repair. The husband and wife appeared as mere shells of humans, only being able to identify with the simplest of things. They would never leave the hospital for the remainder of their lives. It was as if they had died due to the fact they no longer had controlled thought and identity. I mentioned at the beginning of the video that Neville and Harry were more similar than it appears, and that's down to the fact that Neville lost his parents too. Technically, yes, they are still alive, but in the manner of which they currently conduct their lives, it seems that death would be more a preferable choice. At least with Harry, his parents were dead, he mourned their loss, they were gone, and he wished he had them back, but the fact was, they were gone for good. Neville, on the other hand, when visiting his parents in St Mungo's, had to witness them suffer the consequences of what was done to them, which seems worse off. It was like a constant reminder to him of what they had gone through. Then again, it brings the question of what kind of life is a poor quality of life. That's a debatable topic for another time. Neville knew exactly what happened to his parents from a very young age. He knew who Bellatrix Lestrange was, and he immediately identified her that night in the Ministry. I'm not saying that Neville's grandmother did a bad job raising him, but she was heavily critical of him, which affected his confidence growing up. Neville needed nurturing and encouragement, something he didn't receive from Augusta. Bellatrix and the Death Eaters didn't just take Alice and Frank's lives from them, but they also took what I'm sure would have been a different upbringing that Neville surely would have received. As I said, it's one of the worst moments in the entire Potter story, and because it happened before Harry's story actually began, I feel as if it goes under the radar. Anyway guys, that's my take on every detail of what happened to the Longbottoms at the hands of Bellatrix Lestrange, Rodolphus Lestrange, Sebastian Lestrange and Barty Crouch Jr. If there's anything you want to add in the comment section, then please feel free to do so. Remember, as Voldemort once said, there is no good or evil, only power, and those too weak to not click like on this video. See you soon.